And welcome to the Tuesday's Bridge Show. And what a treat we have for you today. We are going over the Atlantic Ocean. And just wait for it, because here's today's show. And there is actually, of course, nobody in the red chair, because we have a technology fellow from the amazing GrassValley technology group and the technology alliance, because you know, we've been big fans of GrassValley since the inception, and we are so happy to actually have Chuck Myers with us today, live from the United States of America. And hello, Chuck.
Hello to you as well. It's really delightful. Thank you for having me on your show today.
And you're not only coming from the US, you're actually live from Lake Tahoe in Nevada.
It's a nice place to live. I'm quite fortunate, and as I joke, someone has to live here.
Well, I can imagine. I know that, you know, a lot of people know Lake Tahoe, especially from the Godfather episode 2.
Yes.
So you didn't happen to inherit his house or something?
No, I'm not so fortunate as to be living right on the lake.
Well, it's a beautiful area, and no doubt about that. But you know, Chuck, I really feel that you probably don't need any in-depth introduction, because, to be honest, I believe that everybody in broadcast know you, because you've been actually participating in standardization forums. You've been working for GrassValley for a number of years. And I kind of suspect that what you don't know about television, well, I don't really want to bother about those things.
You're very kind. There's an awful lot that goes on in television, and I try to make sure I talk about those things I know about.
Well, and you know, you are, the reason we wanted you live on this show is, of course, to talk about digital technology. And of course, well, we always talk about IP, because, whoa, that's really what heats us up. And you know, one of the key things that I found very interesting was the depth and the forwardness of GrassValley's engagement into 2110. I'm thinking about especially the introduction last year of the camera heads, with basically 2110 straight from the camera.
Well, I think it really is the emerging technology. Yeah. And so, honestly, probably GrassValley started to look at it 2013 in earnest. Yeah. That was the beginning of VSF, and then moving into SMPTE standards and the like. I think Grass has also worked quite diligently to ensure that as we've brought it out, it's really been included across the products, right? Yeah. So that it isn't one product, it's really helping to build the system of products. Grass was active with AIMS from a marketing standpoint to help build market acceptance of what became the SMPTE standards. And so I think that was you know, just the commitment of GrassValley to the industry, yeah, and also an enablement of the new technology, which is just going to be our foundation for, you know, the very foreseeable future, a few decades, I'd imagine.
I would imagine so too. And as you say, you know, in 2013, when this was kind of early days, and one of the key things, there was a lot of vendors that was trying out something, but GrassValley was very, very dominant in having that system approach. That, again, it was all about not only connectivity, but utilizing stuff, you know, differently.
I think so. I think that there is, well, first, you know, no man's an island in this industry, so it was important that you could rally as a system. And as that system being interoperable with other companies and their products, again, you know, not everybody can build every product. No. And when we have such a, you know, the creative community in our industry they all have needs, right? And so we're really catering after those creative types, and they tend to, as individuals, have their own needs, and so trying to accommodate those needs but pull it into a uniform working environment was a challenge. But I think it's something that the whole industry enjoys the benefit of.
Absolutely, and that's also where the standards becomes very, very important. And I believe that, well, you've been members of VSF slightly earlier than us, but we're also members of all this nice industry forums that actually helps to cater for, as you say, interoperability. Because without interoperability, there probably won't be a market, right?
Absolutely, that's the key point right there, isn't it? At the end of the day, we're all business people, and we're all trying to earn a living. So how do you create a market? It takes more than one. And
No, but it's very true. And one thing is interoperability. But one thing that I find very engaging is that while AIMS has been pushing for interoperability, there's also this thing about what new functions and what's new kind of usefulness can we achieve with the new technology? Because it's not just another wire, right? It's a completely groundbreaking method of changing how we potentially can do things.
I think that's so. And if I can indulge a few minutes of history, it's only a few seconds. But if we look at SDI in the early 90s, it's really taken us 30 years to get to interoperability with SDI. And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? At first you get the bits, then you get the alignment of pixels, then you get. One of the interesting things about IP is that it doesn't really care about the bandwidth.
No.
You have to install a certain capacity, but once you have a capacity, I could have SD, HD, 3G, 4K, and it's all available. And so there's going to be, I think, another generation where we say, look, now I have interoperability at the physical layer. I can move my data around over 802.xyz. Pick the newest 802. IEEE 802 Ethernet type standard. However, within that, we have software mechanisms that are going to allow us to build more flexible features. And I think this is the key thing that I talked a little bit about maybe seeing if we'll get a few papers on docket in the coming year at some of the forums, but to help people appreciate that IP is really, to be a mathematician, it's not an operating point, it's an operating volume. And within that volume, right, it's because for certain settings or certain things like bandwidth or latency or processing, I don't have to pick a single thing.
No.
I can vary it based on what I need to do. And because I can make that variation, because I can make the variation, then I can build a different kind of plant very quickly. Now, this can all live like on 2110. It can live in the cloud. This is the extension that people will be starting to look at and how they can migrate from on-premise to in the cloud. And, that's going to be the power as people build these new plants.
But you're right, because again, people believe that coaxial cable, digital coaxial cable carrying SDI was pretty homogeneous, but it's not, because you have cable that's certified up to 3G. If you want to go to 6G, that's actually you need a better connector and a cable. And if you're, heaven behold, are trying to carry 12 gigabit of SDI signals, well, you better have some really nice cabling. So it wasn't even ubiquitous in that respect, but Ethernet, as you say, if you have a 100 gig link, or let's say even a 400 gig links, which is purchasable today, then basically you can actually do quite a lot, and you don't need to change your infrastructure, as you say. And I like the way you're describing the topology, because basically you have some ingress stuff, I/O from whatever, or even maybe it comes directly from 2110. Then you need maybe some caching or storage, basically, and then of course you need some processing. And with those three building blocks, either they are on premise or in some cloud, it doesn't really matter.
You're absolutely right. We can think about it as what we did for years was build an infrastructure, build something that connected to SDI so that we could sell you software, deploy software that allowed us to create a workflow.
Yeah.
And now what we're saying is that computer isn't on your desk anymore.
No.
You mentioned it exactly. We could have storage. Well, where? Local, cloud. We can have bandwidth in the facility. We could lease it. We can have compute, we can have GPU, we can have CPU. Those are both resources in the cloud, or we could install cards and have them in a server in our equipment room, or we could tie it together with a classic piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So we want to have these variables. They let us actually flexibly build the computer we need for the level of performance that we want to achieve.
Yeah.
And this is what's going to be powerful for broadcasters in the future, content creation people in the future, is they'll be able to scale what they want to build based on budget and quality goals. It's going to be really exciting to see what comes out of this.
And I like one thing that you also said a bit earlier here, and that was, we do all these things not so much for the engineers, we do it for the creatives, the ones that actually utilize this system to create stories every day on broadcast television, and that's the reason. So I truly log on to that vision. But, one of the reasons we are sitting here talking is that we worked together for now pretty much 1.5 years to also incorporate some of our stuff into your pretty much all-encompassing Orbit management system, which again allows you to do both hybrid systems or pure 2110 systems, and basically also move some of that functionality into the cloud. Tell me a bit about Orbit.
Absolutely. So Orbit is really a coalescence of a number of things that GrassValley's had a legacy in, right? And we've, I used to have a company called Envision, and we used to call it a router control system. It was a very dumb, simple thing, but believe me, it was not dumb. And it was not simple, but it was a panel. You push buttons, and the router did switches. And what's happened over time is that we have equipment, and we could have proc amps, we could have color correctors,
yes,
we could have simple audio mixers, and all of these things are there. Control surfaces, control panels for human operators in order to do what they need to carry out the show. And so in order to now move that up a level, we actually want to be smarter about the equipment.
Yeah.
And so we can say that Orbit is all encompassing. Maybe if I drew a line and looked down to the equipment, it knows that, but looking up, we want to be sure that someone who builds a new device, someone who has a new feature for the market, they can access the other devices that might already be on premise.
Exactly.
And so those other devices, we want to make sure that they can communicate correctly. Yeah. We want to make sure that it's easy to update. Like you've got what's my joke? I've got the latest fader from Penny and Giles, and I'm sorry for the commercial plug.
Oh no,
it brings
Giles,
an image to mind. And the point is, something new comes along. Well, now it's a software plugin. Yeah. You're not rebuilding a plant. You're not recabling a plant. And yet we want to coordinate its actions with that old, just a router control push button panel that's been in the facility for 10 years. We want those two to work together. And that's the beauty of what something like Orbit can do. It provides that orchestration.
So it's, again, as you say, it's orchestration, but also then an abstraction from whatever is under the hood, if you like, to whatever kind of is over the hood. And I like that drawing that you make a line, and then basically you can abstract both levels. You can actually then interchange and actually change physical devices to virtual devices, and you can change the physical control panel to virtual control panels, and you can do it on both levels.
Exactly. So it's a very simple cloud stack architecture. If you want to look at it, we could say the lower level is infrastructure. Yeah. The middle level is services, things like Orbit. The upper level is an application. Yeah. And so we want an application in software. We want an infrastructure in software. We want an application that's the hardware control surface. We want an application that could be a K-frame switcher chassis or the infrastructure. And so we want to mix those. Yeah. But we need to abstract them. So this services layer basically is behavioral representation of equipment that understands the behaviors of people who are creatives and that would drive our control surfaces traditionally. That way we get to move creative talent forward into the future without as big a change as you might have otherwise.
No, because that's another point. Because again, in the good old days, changing any kind of small detail in infrastructure demanded, strict care, because you lost control of your system pretty fast, and especially now when we have a lot of software control layers for automation, let's say in new studios and in playout. So of course, being able to abstract gives you a lot of both redundancy and the capability of interchanging stuff without toying too much about the service level.
It's a true point. And recently, as we were working to bring two products together and make them interoperate, because that's what it's all about for our end customers. I'll use this router example again. As Envision, somebody would say, Chuck, we'd love to buy your routers, but they have to integrate with this other product.
Exactly.
And this meant a software driver development. I think it would take us 6 to 10 weeks, maybe, based on the driver and what have you. So as we went to look at interoperability, we were able to exploit this technique of abstraction. And I was talking to an engineer. We all got together. We looked back and forth at what was required. I think my engineer said it took him 2 hours at his end. So it really is a very, very powerful concept. And this is what helps propel cloud technology that we're all sometimes, I'm still in awe of it, Because
that leads me directly to the next subject I want to pick your brain on. Because you guys, this is not only for the commercial benefit, even though we are commercially aware here, but you guys got a new cloud-based initiative, which is called the AIMP. And that's pretty impressive, because you can actually then draw a lot of basic functionality and put it straight onto the cloud, and you can do it today.
It is, and it follows that same 3-layer model I went through. There's infrastructure, there's services, and there's applications. Yeah. And so what we can do then is say, is it a piece of module? Is it a full-up K-frame?
Yeah.
On-prem or in the truck? Or is it a 20-channel input production switcher? Right? Basically comes as a function of bandwidth limitation. But we know what a switcher is. We know what the buttons do. We know what a mix effect engine is. Those behaviors are still controlled by a creative in the standard way.
Exactly.
They have a K-frame panel. They control those behaviors. What we're doing is managing it differently if it's in the cloud or if it's on-prem, because obviously there are some differences.
Yeah, because one difference that we talked about a bit earlier has to do with time, of course, because latency figures are a bit different if you then go over distance and if you go over generic infrastructures like standard computer centers. And standard data centers is very, very valuable for a lot of stuff that currently hasn't been very time constrained. What you guys are doing is pushing that limit closer and closer and closer to real time. And that I found was very interesting, because there's not all signals in a news operation needs to be exactly real time. So you can actually put a lot of cloud effort on those kind of signals, which doesn't demand the stringent, a sub-microsecond kind of accuracy.
That's right. So I think there's a couple aspects to the problem, but you're very astute to have pointed out what you just did. One of the interesting things about human factors is we can, the full circle is I perceive something, I process what I want to do, and then I execute as a human being. And that whole cycle is somewhere 250, 300 milliseconds. Yeah. If you look at various published research. If we take a look at another set of research that says I just want to respond. Now we start getting down into the 150, 100 kind of a milliseconds until a human being can perceive that. Then the third one is anything that's relative. So as an example, if I look on a monitor wall and I see 6 of the pips change and the 7th one changes later, even one frame, I see that right away. Yep. Because it's a differential. And this is why lip sync is so critical and it's so easy for us to anticipate. Humans are very used to sound and mouths and how they should interact. And so that's the thing that's the most critical is lip sync. If I take those human factors and I exploit them for how I deploy them, then it looks like I can cheat physics.
Yes, it's very true.
And so that's a piece of, now we make a decision. Can we do something in the cloud? Well, maybe the processing is so expensive you'd rather have it on the ground. Or maybe your requirement is such that you're doing audio, video, layback live, and it needs to be at that venue. So it's going to have to be a very, very low latency.
Yeah.
Okay, then that's something we can pull back to the venue. So treating workflow based on the human factor requirement of that workflow allows us to fully exploit the cloud.
I like this because it makes not only sense from a deployment technological standpoint, but also from economics. Pure economics can dictate that this is very, very smart to do. Because we all remember when we, for a big thing, let's say the Super Bowl. I mean, you don't come up with one truck. You at least need two main trucks, the two satellite backups, blah, blah, blah. It just escalates out of control because you want to have all the equipment there. But with IP, you could actually then have a lot of the other equipment somewhere else and actually have better redundancy.
You certainly have fallbacks. There's two things here. One of the things that you mentioned last was redundancy.
Yeah.
And really the cloud is based on resiliency, right? So we don't necessarily say I have two identical things.
No.
So like for the Super Bowl, I have everything I need for the highest value.
Yes.
But I might have something lesser because it's doing the second program. It's doing color sidebar programming. It's doing some other functions, equally critical, need to be high quality. If I had to, I could carry on with that lesser function until I solve the problem with the larger function.
Exactly.
And again, this is something you can do in the cloud.
Yeah.
When I did something on-prem, you really kind of had to build what you needed on-prem. You're building a building and you size the building. And so that's that's what we see there. And then to your point about I think I also saw an aerial photo of PGA late last year. There was like, I don't know how many miles, kilometers of fiber there were. There had to be 40 trucks, big trucks, U.S. trucks, big. And I'm looking at this and going, there's a truck for every hole. I think there were 2 trucks for every hole, right? And I don't know how much of that goes away for that event because it's a very high value event.
Absolutely.
But now you can certainly see that, hey, if I wanted to, and I'm not diminishing the quality in the U.S. Pac-10 is a large college conference. They could probably look at virtualization, whereas the main program for the Super Bowl would not. But I can assure you this last Super Bowl did do virtualization for second channel programming.
Yeah, and also, as you said, that you can do a hybrid, so that basically instead of thinking about the switcher in the cloud, you can have certain channels on that switcher in the cloud and other functions basically local. There is an endless opportunistic way of doing it that actually suits your kind of program style.
That's right.
Because the one thing that is very important is not to try to move around so much hardware.
It's really expensive for everybody, and the formulas I've heard or the constraints I've heard are different.
Yeah.
If I talk to someone in Europe, they'll be worried about large trucks, price of fuel, narrow streets.
Yeah.
If I talk to someone else in the U.S., it's a completely different set of concerns. But everyone has their concerns about the costs associated with it, and typically virtualization can give them some opportunity to save cost.
Absolutely. No, I want to have a short break here, Chuck, because we talked about the Orbit control system, and I'm very proud that we are 100% integrated into that with the through the NMOS stack. but also with some interesting, you know, groundwork done on the ISO 7 communication as well, which I really like. But we have, you know, here on the show our mad musical genius, which basically has taken the Orbit to a completely new dimension. So let's listen to our mad musical genius. Here comes Axel.
I called it. Speaking of which, planets and basketballs, in Chopin's mind, his bass is always orbiting, you know, in his mind, like this. Always orbiting. And so is the melody orbiting around in Chopin's mind. Want to play orbiting basketball?
Well, nothing beats a little Chopin, but what do you think, Chuck? Some Chopin and, of course, some amazing stuff done with our automation systems.
Absolutely. It's really, I love music, and any chance to get Envision started in audio way back in the 90s. Any chance to see the technology and use it work together is always brilliant. So that's some good stuff you're showing there.
It really is. Chuck, we can actually sit here talk all night long, and one day we're definitely going to do that. But I truly want to thank you for taking your time to speak to us. There is truly a brave new world out there, and I'm very impressed by the thoughts and the mindset of pushing the limits to the extreme here. And I must congratulate you guys with the initiatives. That's very truly impressive, I must say.
Well, on behalf of GrassValley, we all thank you. It's one of those things, you know. It's the companies have come together. We know GrassValley is an amalgamation of companies, combination. And so there's a lot of very bright people with a lot of expertise in different areas of the whole content creation chain. So being able to work with a team like that, I think helps us pull some of these wonderful things off and make them reality. Oh, that's Thank you for the compliment.
No, but thank you, Chuck. And until next time we meet, then basically, thank you very much. And basically to our viewers, I would say then that don't forget to tune in next Tuesday with, I don't know if we can get even more exciting guests after this one, but we will try. We will definitely try. In the meantime, have a beautiful Tuesday.